All right, let me see how to start this. Okay, so this is it right here. Here we go.
Okay.
Studying archaeology has always been about um, understanding material culture, right? You're using archaeology to understand culture in the past, but archaeology has always failed to do that in a at least a culturally appropriate way. So I was fortunate enough to be a part of a project where the emphasis was to understand cultural landscape and the archaeology of fasting, usually called vision quest, by studying the oral history. So we actually got to participate in field interviews and ethnography, which wasn't done a whole lot in the preliminary. It's always done after, like as a supplemental to the project. In eastern Montana, in the Pryor Mountains, we studied a ridge line called East Pryor Mountain, but the Crow call it Bijiakpa Aligio, which means where they saw the rope. And it's a cultural landscape that's defined by fasting. And what fasting is someone will choose for a variety of reasons to go out alone and sit in the mountains or really any place that's designated for a variety of reasons for 4 days, 4 nights without food or water and shelter. And they would construct a rock bed on the ground and they would sleep there, and it was mandated that they pray when the sun's coming up and when the sun's going down, but they could pray any time of the day, but it had to be them 2 times. So when you're on federal lands you're doing any kind of research related to these high altitude sites, you'll find these stone circles or horseshoe shaped stone rings, and they were previously categorized as eagle catching pits or even burials. But what we learned was that these rings were for fasting, and we got to ask these people these questions. And one of the things they came out, they told us right away what the difference was. So the round ones, they were round because that person's fast was done for kind of a general theme, typically for a vow. And a vow was someone was sick in your family, and that individual might say, if my relative is healthy by spring, then I'll go and fast. Now, the other type of fasting bed is the horseshoe shaped ones. And those were people who were seeking spiritual power or spiritual guidance. So they faced the opening of the bed towards the rising sun or towards whatever landscape they were seeking power from. So these beds can be orientated towards certain features in a tribe's history or a tribe's culture. Spiritual landscapes are items of cultural importance, or places of cultural importance. The Crow people believe that land, especially rocks, things that are developed out of rocks, so like solid rock, bedrock, we believe it to hold power from God, from the Creator. So in our creation, Ejikbalia, the Creator of all things, He placed His power in the rocks. So crows will seek spiritual power or spiritual guidance, and cliff faces are they'll look for odd looking rocks on the ground, or they'll go to a high place that's typically bedrock. It's a solid foundation, somewhere where they can see stars and the sun clearly, but it has a lot to do with isolation. So you pick places that are away from everything, and the idea is that you're going to be undisturbed and it's just you and creation. But mainly, a lot has to do with how we understand spiritual landscape, which is these places that are directly connected to the power of God or the power of the creators.
Are we ready?
So remarkably, like the stories we would hear, the oldest story that I found of the landscape was of a guy named Kagehisash, and his name is well known, Lance, and he fasted at the dry head or the East Pryor Mountain, and that's where the name where they saw the ropes, because he scared himself in the chest as payment for his spiritual power. So and we know that story to exist before the horse. How far back it goes, we don't know, but we know it goes that far. The manner in which he went fasting, how he prepped himself to go by feeding his clan fathers and having minor ceremonies before the fasting, is done in the same way as it is today. So it's pretty remarkable to me that the oldest known story of this landscape, which is that of Kagehisash, and then moving all the way to today, where we know, at least in early reservation times, Horace Longbear and Philip Beaumont and different men like that would fast there, and how they prepped themselves and how they got ready and then conducted the ceremony was done in the same way as Kagehisash. So it's kind of neat to see the oral history not change in that amount of time. At the very minimum, 500 to 600 years, but there's no doubt that it predated that. So it was a variation of elders and historians, Crow historians. I think I interviewed 14 individuals on fasting culture in general, but maybe 7 in relation to this exact landscape.
Is that given anxiety? The horse? Yeah. I cannot stand the horse.
Need. So if the person is wanting more horses, more money, the ability to heal people, power for gambling, power for singing, maybe he has no wife, or maybe he sees himself as not very attractive or something. So that's we didn't get a whole lot into that because we felt that was like pretty personal for people, and so that was not the point of the study. But we would hear things that, of course, some people were very open about why they fasted, and it could vary from. So in more modern times, it seemed always to do with a sick relative. So somebody may be sick, so they would go and fast for that person. It was more common for someone to fast to fulfill a vow as opposed to seek power, but that was very common as well. And what's remarkable about the Crow is that it's not required. Fasting is not a required ceremony by any age group. So in other cultures, fasting can be done as a rite of passage, but with the Crow, it's all voluntary, but the majority of Crow young men would go and fast. Of the Christian church, that the vow culture has died out, and the seeking power is still there, but it's dwindling. What most people go to do is, while somebody is sick, they will go and fast for that person, and as a way of kind of isolation and prayer for that reason, as opposed to like making a deal with the Creator saying, if you heal this person, then I'll make payment by fasting. which is kind of different than how it's viewed today. That still exists. Vow culture still does exist, but it's dwindling. The search for spiritual power still exists, but again, it's dwindling. But whether you're a traditional Crow person, a Christian Crow person, fasting still seems to be a large part of Crow belief. The reasoning had a lot to do with it, like why vowing versus like seeking power, because it was always 99% of the time people thought you go and fast to get power, and even I did. But when I must have heard 100 fasting stories. Been 80, probably 85% of it was vows, and that just blew me away. A vow would be like, say you had a sick relative and that relative was in the hospital, and you said, if my relative comes home healthy, then I'll go and fast. Where like nowadays you would say, oh, so-and-so's in the hospital, I'll go and fast. So while they're in the hospital, you go and fast for 4 days.
Right.
Where the difference is you're kind of like making a deal saying they got to make it home first before I'll go do that. Which all these old timers said that was the more appropriate way to do it. One guy even told me a story where he did it wrong, and he said that his relative was sick and he went to go fast for that person. And he said I'll fast till they're healthy. He said I ended up fasting every year for 7 years. So every summer he'd go on fast, and finally his dad told him, he said, that's not the way you're supposed to do it. The way you're supposed to do it is say, when they come home healthy, I'll go and fast. And then he told me that's how I do it now.
It's like saying, I'm going to fast till that guy gets a girlfriend.
Yeah. Yep. Versus when he gets a girlfriend, I'll go and fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. We learned that no landscape seems to stand out more than any other. So we went in there pre-thinking that, it's only these really high elevation sites. And what we learned was that it's so deeply personal that any one of these sites can mean one thing to one person and mean something else to the next person, because we're completely unaware of that. The other thing was that there was a lot of fasting beds that were previously recorded as other features, and they came out to be fasting beds. And the third and probably the most important thing was that it was very clear not to use the word vision quest, which was done all the time. And that had mainly to do with the reasoning for fasting. The majority of people who had fasted that we got to hear the stories of them, it had nothing to do with seeking power. It mainly had to do with fulfilling the vow, which we kind of coined the term spiritual reciprocity for this. You go and sit 4 days as payment for something good happening to you.
Oh, you want to know about fasting?